Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee McKenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about sex, specifically how to talk about sex. We live in a culture that's fairly sex-obsessed. Just type porn into your phone and see what pops up. But for all the information that's available about how to have more sex or better sex or be sexier, a lot of us remain really uncomfortable or even baffled about how to talk about sex with our partners. Learning to talk about sex in a healthy, constructive way can really open up levels of communication, trust, understanding, and connection that add a whole different dimension and really deepen a sexual relationship. But for all of our sexual liberation and all of the sexual material and information that's available to us, many people have never learned how to talk about sex in a comfortable or productive way. I was working with a client recently, a very attractive guy in his mid-30s, actively dating, really smart and successful guy, has a lot of language around his emotions and a deep spiritual practice, but he was raised with a lot of shame around sexuality. And even naming body parts like penis and vagina is really uncomfortable for him. He doesn't have any trouble having sex, but talking about sex can be really uncomfortable for him. And one of the first things I find helpful about talking about sex is to have a conversation about how to have the conversation. I worked with a couples therapist once who said, talking about sex should be like talking about what we're going to have for dinner. How can we develop a culture or a circumstance where talking about sex is just normal, just a regular part of the conversation? And growing to that level of comfort with sex talk and sex discussions can be really healing and empowering for people. So my experience is that everybody's in a different place and comfort level with discussing sexuality. And the best place to start is to get permission to even talk about it at all. And the best times to start the discussion about having the discussion is at a time that's really neutral and calm when nothing else is happening. If I'm ever going to bring up any kind of a topic that might be difficult, controversial, or challenging in any way, it's best to bring it up when there's nothing else going on. Particularly in talking about sex, it's best to do it at a neutral time when everybody's got their clothes on and there's not actually sexual activity happening. And I find really making room for my partner and their needs is a great place to start and let them know I'm creating a safe space for them and I want them to have input in what we're doing. So having the meta conversation about how to talk about talking about sex. So I like to start with a lot of openness right in the beginning. Hey, I'd like to have a conversation about sex. Are you willing to talk about sex with me and our sex life? Hopefully the answer is yes, I'm willing to talk about sex. And you might want to assure them at that moment that you just want to grow in intimacy with them and what your intention is. I think it would be good for us to be able to have more open and honest conversation about sex. There's nothing wrong. It might be good to not really have an agenda. Just open the conversation. And again, hopefully they say, yes, they're willing to talk about sex, just like they might be willing to talk about what kind of foods they like. Or we might want to share where we would like to travel to. So once we agree that we're willing to have a conversation about sex, then the second question is often, when would be a good time to do that? Some people might be uncomfortable in a situation where they might be overheard if you have kids or roommates around. And to give them the opportunity to have some input about when and where the conversation might take place. I'm going to suggest that you consider not having the conversation in bed, but in a more neutral setting. Maybe over coffee in the morning, over dinner, or at a walk in a nice relaxing place. Again, a neutral setting. And once you agree on the where and when you're going to have the conversation, maybe clarifying your intention. I'd like to learn more about what you like and share more about what I like. Maybe talk about some things we want to experiment with. And some good guidelines when talking about anything that might be challenging is to be honest, to be kind, to be positive and appreciative, to be compassionate, and to take responsibility for ourselves. And if you're looking to grow in your own sexual maturity and intimacy, then you might want to think about this as an ongoing conversation rather than a talk. So there's not too much pressure to solve all the problems in a 1.5-hour discussion. It's good to take things in manageable, digestible chunks. It can be really fun and interesting to learn about our partner, and through that we often learn more about ourselves. So again, starting with the largest questions first, how is it to talk about sex? What's comfortable or uncomfortable about talking about it? And just to be curious and to ask those questions of yourself too. I find the best approach when talking to my lover is to actually talk to them like they're one of my friends. And although that might sound silly, that was a fairly novel idea for me until well into adulthood, that I often had conversations with my lover that had much more of an agenda, and I took things much more personally than I would with one of my girlfriends. And when I started to treat my lovers like I treated my girlfriends, it really changed the whole quality of the conversation. It loosened and lightened everything up. And that's true for discussions around sexuality as well. So keeping conversations short and simple and building on that success can help to make sexual conversation a more normal part of the relationship. So a couple tips to make these conversations successful is to speak in I statements, to take responsibility for myself. So that means taking responsibility for my own feelings, for my own body, for my own experience, even taking responsibility for my own orgasm. Most of us respond much better to being appreciated than we do to being criticized. And so it's really helpful to start with what I like. Never underestimate the power of honest appreciation to breed warmth and love and good feelings. Again, we want these to be successful conversations, that everybody feels good coming out of the conversation and is open to having it again, open to talking about sex even more in the future. So you might want to consider 5 things that you really appreciate about your partner. Maybe 5 variations on the idea of, I like it when you blank, or I feel really loved when. So for example, I really like it when you put your arm around me. I really like it when you kiss my neck. And I think it's really helpful to pick specific things that they do that you like or appreciate. And cultivating appreciation for our partners in itself is a really beautiful process. A lot of us grow up with a lot of criticism, and practicing appreciation is like miracle grow in a relationship. So it might even take a little time for me to notice, what do I appreciate? I like watching you get undressed for bed, or I love how you look first thing in the morning when your hair's all ruffled. So cultivating appreciation. There's a really beautiful practice that comes out of the 12-step fellowship, Recovering Couples Anonymous. It's a nighttime spiritual practice where each partner in the couple says something that they wish they had done better in the day, and then they name 2 things they appreciate about their partner. It's a really beautiful and powerful practice. Most of us do the opposite. We justify our own position and we can name lots of things that our partner does wrong. It tends to promote division rather than connection. It's important to be aware that people have sex for lots of different reasons, and none of them are right or wrong. It can be a very maturing process to really make room for your partner as a separate person who may have different motives than you, and to not take that personally. Some people have sex really because they like the way it makes their body feel. Sex is more of a physical experience for them than an emotional experience. Some people have sex because it makes them feel connected and loved by the other person. We might have sex as a way to exchange affection, certainly to make babies, to play with power dynamics. Sex can be playful or stress relief. We might have sex out of a sense of duty or obligation, or just as a way to relax before you go to sleep. And in taking responsibility for ourselves and being curious about our partners, it's interesting to answer these questions within ourselves. What are my motives for having sex? And I love the idea of just giving people a lot of room to be who they are. Again, like I do for my friends, without judgment, because that's really what love and intimacy is about. I've used this little acronym about intimacy. Into me, you see, is what intimacy is. And love in its highest form is not about getting something from someone else. It's about sharing an appreciation of each other and the unfolding mystery of who we are as growing, evolving humans. Perhaps once we've set the tone by talking about what we like or appreciate about our partner, we might be able to introduce the idea of some things we're curious about or some things we'd like to try. And ask them, is there anything they're curious about or anything they'd like to try? And again, to try to not have an agenda and keep this a light and positive conversation. And if they say, nope, there's nothing I want to try, we can say, well, if there's anything that ever comes up, I'm open to hearing it. Here's some things that I'm curious about. Would you be interested or willing to try them? And if you are, how might we do that? Is there a way to do that that would work for you? Because this isn't just about getting what we want from another person. This is about sharing an experience, learning about them, and growing and exploring together. And it's a tremendous opportunity to learn more about ourselves. So for the first sex conversation, I'd keep it light, keep it simple. You might want to have a doable, actionable item come out of it, like, I'd like to have sex in the shower sometime. When could we do that? And you might set an appointment to do that. Or you might just end the conversation and say, how was that for you? Was that okay? And could we have a conversation about sex again? Can we start to make that a normal part of our ongoing dialogue? And at some point, if the dialogue is going well, you may want to get more specific. But again, it's best to be positive. It's best to talk about what I do like rather than what I don't like. For example, to say, I really like it when you touch me this way, or I really like it when you do this, rather than, oh, I don't like it when you do that. Talk about what you do like. We're trying to create a safe space for people to learn and grow without feeling criticized, shamed, or inadequate. And as the sexual conversation progresses, it can be really fun and educational to set up some time to actually have feedback sessions in real time if people are comfortable doing that. So could we have a time where I actually do things with your body or you do things with my body and we give each other feedback? I like it when you touch me this way. How does this feel? And again, to be curious and experimental, playful with each other. And to assure each other that if you don't like something or if something isn't positive or stimulating, it's not a reflection on that person. It's just a personal preference. That I don't have to take it personally and that we might not like the same things. And it can be a really mature discussion to talk about how to talk about sex. Sex is an incredible mystery. It's tremendously powerful on all levels, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when we bring our compassion, our awareness, our curiosity, and honesty and kindness to it, no matter how long we've been in partnership, there's always room to grow in communication, in commitment, in caring for each other and for ourselves. And it's my experience that healthy sexual conversations can actually bring more intimacy than the sex acts themselves. I'd love to hear your feedback and experience with sex talk and relationship. DM me on Instagram at Open Door Growth. If you'd like to get a free download of the first chapter of my book, you can click the link in the show notes. And if you want to find out how spiritual psychology might benefit you in your life, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. Deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon, and blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.